Whitmer presiding.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Good morning, Judge. Let's go back on representing file 22-5165-FH for day 2, so to speak, of the evidentiary portion of the trial. One thing I want to go over, but first let me address when the court received permission from the attorneys. I just went in to drop off the lunch menus to the jury. And then one of them indicated they had a question. I just simply asked them to write it down. And one indicated that they had received a piece of paper that they characterized that may be evidence that she wasn't sure they all got. And I'm not sure what to do with it. I think what happened was an additional piece of paper was given to her when the exhibits after they were passed out yesterday. Obviously, I assumed that to be a burden. And it sounds like from talking to the attorneys that document she was given will be an exhibit that is proposed today. So I don't think it'll create any issues. I just wanted to keep that on record. The other thing that I wanted to address, I had a chance to talk to the attorneys in chambers yesterday about a couple of topics, and I want to talk about the sequestration order and the live stream. Obviously, it's an easier thing for a court to enforce if the sequestration order only applies within these 4 walls, because the attorneys can see everyone in the courtroom and they're aware of who's in here, if they're a potential witness, and all of that. I also understand why somebody like a family member, for example, may want to watch the trial on live stream, even if they are a subpoenaed witness. The reason for a sequestration order, and I have done it in every case, meant to not let somebody watch. It's not meant to hide the 8 ball from anybody in particular. What we need to ensure is the integrity of this trial, that it is a fair and just trial, and that all of the defendants' rights, plural defendants' rights, are protected. The way that we do that is to ensure that the witnesses are only testifying, or the way we do it in part, is to ensure that witnesses are only testifying as to their personal knowledge. That's the reason that they can't watch someone else testify, because then they may put their testimony in reliance on what they've heard from another witness. So I certainly understand a family member wanting to watch, but I would just simply let them know that it is about the integrity and making sure that this is not compromised, and then ensuring that they can in fact testify, because if they were to violate the sequestration order, then it becomes a potential issue that the court has to deal with in determining whether or not that person can still testify. So I assume that will alleviate any potential situations, but let me go through the attorneys. Mr. Ralston, let me start with you. Anything you need to address from the people's perspective before bringing the jury back?
No, sir.
And Mr. and Ms. Nunley?
No, thank you.
Mr. Seiler?
No, thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Just that Mr. Ralston was kind enough to bring this up at 2 in chambers, and Eric's mother was watching yesterday. I don't know if she understood the significance of that, and that her testimony is extremely limited as to any facts. In fact, it's unremarkable and won't have much of a relevant difference to anything other than character. So with that said, is the court okay to allow that family member to, that witness to watch? She has watched the opening, which actually I don't know that sequestration counts for an opening, but she also saw some testimony.
I wasn't made aware of any specific issue that would lead me to believe any action needed to be taken at this time. That's why I left it as a generalized warning, so to speak. But obviously the warning was put in place to ensure future compliance.
Thank you.
Please all rise for the jury. Everyone may be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. One thing before we get started, as you'll recall, we're still in the prosecution's case and we left off in the middle or a portion of the Gretchen Whitmer's testimony, so in a moment I'll call him back up. Just so that you all are aware and the parties know this, the court will re-swear in a witness each day if their testimony carries over. If, let's say, his testimony were to continue until after lunch or a break, the court will simply confirm with the witness that they understand that they're still under oath. But I will re-swear somebody each day. The other thing is, we did talk about the note that we sent out with the question. The way that I would phrase that is that piece of paper or document was simply given to that juror inadvertently. It sounds like that may be a future exhibit that's coming in later, but that simply was given to you inadvertently. So at least for this portion of it, disregarding anything you may have seen, if it comes in later, then obviously you can reference that. Okay. Mr. Ralston, let me go to you. I assume we're going to continue with Agent Nichols' testimony.
Morning, Judge, yes.
Okay. Agent Nichols, you approach. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead and have a seat. Mr. Ralston.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's, starting off today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Dan. We heard yesterday that he received payment for what he did in terms of this investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and can you tell the jury how much how much money he received for his services?
Well, the total amount of money I gave him was $54,000 and some change, but it wasn't all for services. It did include a lot of expenses.
Okay, let's talk about that. Okay, so it sounds like it breaks out into a couple of different buckets. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what's the first bucket?
Well, the first bucket would be there's $24,000 for directly reimbursable expenses. So receipts for things such as a computer, a watch for safety, a computer to prepare and listen to the recordings for trial, reimbursement for some travel expenses.
The $24,000 that you're talking about, this is money that came out of Dan's pocket?
Yes, so Dan paid it and then got the receipts and provided them to the FBI.
Let me just stop you there for a minute. You said there was a watch. Why would he need a watch?
Well, during a lot of these meetings and trainings he was going to, phones were taken away prior to discussions, and we were concerned that he might be in trouble and we wouldn't have a way to reach him. So we paid for an expensive watch that had capability to transmit from the watch, a cell phone signal, so that he could send an SOS if needed.
Okay. So $24,000 in expenses. Did Dan miss any work for this?
Yes, sir.
And then backing out, you said you met Dan March 17th, 2020, and the arrests occurred October 7th of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
It sounds about close to 7 months there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. How much work did Dan miss?
He missed about 15 weeks of work during the time based on our tasking to work on behalf of the FBI.
Okay. And in terms of this tasking you're talking about, can you tell us a little bit about the travel that was involved?
Sure. So there was at least 11 FTXs or field training exercises, and then 3 meetings around Michigan. He also went to Wisconsin and Ohio.
Okay. As Dan's handler, after the arrests occurred, were you concerned at all about his safety?
Oh, yes.
How come?
Well, an associate of Barry Croft had posted a contract for information about Dan shortly after the trial, and I was very concerned that folks would try to target him.
His question is, the timing of what he's talking about has nothing to do with the investigation he's talking about after the trial. And I don't know how they can be concerned with the safety after the trial, and he's flopping it back to the time of the investigation.
What is the time frame of the trial you're referencing?
So, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was not, I intended to say arrests and not trial.
So after the October 7th arrest?
Correct. After the October 7th arrests, we were concerned about his safety.
Right, and knowing that, Mr. Barnett, you still have the objection?
No,
And you were saying the reason for your concern?
One of Barry Croft's associates had posted a contract for information about Dan, and we were worried that as a key witness, his life might be in danger.
Okay. Did you make any suggestions to Dan about what he might do to enhance his own personal safety?
Yes, I told him that he should relocate, he should move, and that he should sell his vehicle. He should try to get cameras around his house, and he should stay in a hotel for a period of time and not go back to his house.
Did he do those three things?
Yes.
Okay, and does he have to come out of pocket to do those three things?
Yes.
Okay, now you told us about $24,000 for, direct expenses that he had receipts for, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and you paid him 54, so the other 30,000, can you explain that?
Sure. So that was just to cover his missed work time, any expenses he would have had on work or purchasing ammo or food that he may have had during those 7 months to make sure he could pay his bills.
Okay. Did Dan ever ask you for money?
He never did.
I'm going to object to the meeting, make sure the questions.
Mr. Austin?
Calls for a yes or no answer. I'm not sure it's suggested.
Well, I guess there have been a couple, I guess what I would phrase leading questions, but they've been introductory in nature, and then once Agent was getting into the substance, maybe the wrong word of the testimony for the issue, then they are no longer leading. So as long as we're introductory, and I just want to go over it all over.
Thank you.
Did Dan ever ask you for money?
No.
Okay. So why'd you pay him?
Well, we were asking a lot from him, and I was worried that he wouldn't be able to continue if he couldn't pay his bills.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, you talked about, your role as an investigator in domestic terrorism cases, and that you've spent quite a bit of your career there, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you remember the subjects of investigation chart that we went through yesterday?
Yes.
Okay, it's exhibit number 1, I believe.
Yes.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about your role as the investigator in this case in terms of, is it important to assess each subject for their level of dangerousness?
So yes, absolutely. That's the core crux of investigating counterterrorism cases, is to assess the level of dangerousness. If you think somebody's not dangerous and then they go out and conduct an attack, obviously you've dropped the ball, and that's the whole point, is to make sure that an attack is not conducted. And so that's a big portion of being a counterterrorism investigator.
Tell the jury the kind of things you look for when you're trying to assess the dangerousness of somebody.
Well, you try to gather as much information as you can about what they say, but ultimately it's what they do. You have to look at how they act, and the concept here is when the rubber meets the road, what are they going to do? Are they going to go out and shoot somebody? Are they going to be a trigger puller? What types of things are they going to do rather than just what they say online? Obviously, there's freedom of speech and people can say whatever they want, but assessing their level of dangerousness is really what their actions say.
So, and you said in terms of, I think you mentioned there, what they say is one thing, but what they do is another, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is there a term of art or phrase that's commonly used to describe a person that speaks but doesn't act?
Yes. So they're called paper patriots or keyboard warriors. Those are people who are prolific online or say things but don't actually follow up with what they're talking about.
In the subjects of investigation there, I mean, does anybody on the subjects of investigation fit that model?
Yes.
We put that down. Tell us about that.
Sure. So the third from the right here, Sean Fix. Mr. Fix was Adam Fox's XO, or executive officer, his second in charge, and he claimed to be a Navy SEAL. He claimed to have 50 caliber rifles. He claimed to work with SEAL teams, and he gave Adam Fox ideas and helped refine his plan. But he ultimately never showed up to surveillance. He didn't show up to training in Luther. He talked a big game, but it was all pretend. It was just a pretend SEAL.
Amanda Keller, there in the lower right-hand right-hand corner. Where did she fit in?
Well, she talked a lot. She was at a lot of the field training exercises, but ultimately she got scared as the plot escalated, and she came to law enforcement and reported the plot to the FBI.
Okay. I mean, she actually came in and reported?
Yes, she called in, and then also she came in and met with the FBI.
Okay. Well, yesterday we heard from Mr. Barnett that Mr. Molitor was very scared. And did he ever come to law enforcement and report what was going on?
No.
Okay. You talked about, I think you used the word trigger pullers, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What does the word operator mean to you?
Operator is a category of a role that terrorists play. So in the FBI, we categorize people into recruiters, facilitators, fundraisers, radicalizers, and operators. So an operator is the trigger puller, the one who's willing to engage in violence when the time comes.
Okay. During the course of the investigation, yesterday you testified over 150 hours of recordings that you listened to, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was Michael Knoll on some of those recordings?
Yes, sir.
How about Mr. William Knoll?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you ever hear any statements from either Michael or William Knoll about being concerned about what Mr. Fox and Mr. Croft were talking about and planning?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Did you ever hear anybody describe the Knoll brothers as paper warriors?
No, absolutely not.
Who's Phil Robinson?
Phil Robinson is another leader of the Michigan Liberty Militia. There's three core leaders, the Knoll twins and Phil Robinson, who are the face and leaders of the Michigan Liberty Militia.
Okay. Did you ever hear either of the Knoll brothers describe him in some fashion as an operator or accelerationist or a radical, any of the categories you've mentioned?
Yes, I heard the Knoll brothers talk about Phil Robinson as a peacock. He was talked about as somebody who was friendly to law enforcement, who just wanted to get in front of the cameras, who wasn't actually willing to step up when the time came.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about proposed Exhibit 129. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. 129, it's an animated exhibit. It shows the route of travel during the daytime surveillance on August 29th, 2020.
Okay. And can you tell us how you were able to produce that?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, during the surveillance, CHS Dan had a transmitting device which provided his GPS location, and then I was following behind him doing surveillance myself. So I took that data and the timestamps, and I put together a demonstrative exhibit to show how the travel occurred and where they were when certain conversations happened to help with my testimony.
Okay. Accurate as to the location and the route traveled?
Yes.
Okay. I move for admission of 129, please.
Mr. Vincent?
No comment.
Mr. Sarver?
If we stand on our objection.
Mr. Barnett?
No objection.
The court will admit Exhibit 129
Thank you, Judge. Let's, before we go through that, on the daytime surveillance, remind the jury what date that happened.
That was August 29th, 2020.
Okay, and before, whose idea was it to conduct the daytime surveillance?
That was Adam Fox's idea.
Okay, we heard yesterday it was the FBI's idea.
That's not true.
Okay. Did Adam Fox invite Eric Molitor on this daytime surveillance?
Yes, he did.
Okay, and was Dan part of this?
Yes, he was.
Okay, tell us how he was involved.
So Dan drove and picked up Adam Fox in in Grand Rapids at the back shack, and then headed north. He drove during the entire surveillance.
Okay. Did you know this surveillance was going to happen before August 29th?
Yes, Dan was invited by Adam Fox before August 29th in the days before.
Okay. Was there a reason Dan drove, is what I'd like you to explain to the jury.
Oh, yes. So I required Dan to drive. During the course of the investigation, there was discussions about attacking law enforcement, and I was concerned that if any local law enforcement happened to pull them over, there could be a shootout at that time. I didn't know what Adam Fox's plans were. Initially, Adam Fox talked about going to Lansing and looking at the governor's mansion or ceremonial office for any governor down in Lansing first. So I didn't know what his plans were. He ultimately did not go down there, but in either regard, I didn't want there to be a chance for any violence if Dan was involved in some sort of operation where they're going out to a target location.
Adam, can you cue up 129, please? We're going to play Exhibit 129 now, and we may stop it as we move through it a little bit. Pause it there, please. Just a little bit forward, please, Adam. Thank you. Pause. The time of pickup down in Grand Rapids, that was, what was happening in Grand Rapids, remind us.
Adam Fox was at the back shack, so CHS Dan went to the back shack, drove there, picked him up, and they...
And the time of pickup down in Grand Rapids, I believe, was 11:01,
I think.
Okay.
Is that on the screen?
And what time did did Mr. Fox and Dan arrive and where Mr. Molitor lived?
12:18 p.m., so just afternoon.
Okay. And go ahead and advance the next time, please. Okay. Looks like they were, you could pause that just for a second, thanks, Adam. About how long were they at Mr. Molitor's house?
About 15 minutes, it looked like.
Okay, go ahead, please. Pause. What time do they arrive, Elk Rapids?
1:31 p.m.
Okay. Now, you're following them, is that right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, are there other people from law enforcement involved in this too?
There's one other agent with me. Jason
Okay.
Chambers was following as well.
Okay. And they arrive at 1:31. Go ahead, please, Adam. Pause. Can you tell ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's a red circle around the Birch Lake area. What does that indicate?
So that's the entire area that they surveilled. So they started on the west side of the lake, then they went down around the south side of the lake over to the Oasis Red Bull Tavern. Then they went through the neighborhoods on the east side of the lake and came up to the north side of the lake where they found the boat launch. So they circled that area during their surveillance around Birch Lake.
Okay, go ahead, please, Adam. And pause. The times that are indicated there, 1:33 through 4:33, my math is 3 hours.
Yes, sir.
What's going on during that 3-hour time period?
That's their surveillance around Birch Lake. It also includes the lunch they had at the Red Bull Tavern.
Okay, we'll talk about that more in a little while, but, so, he spent 3 hours around the area of Birch Lake?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, please, Adam. And pause. There's now a red circle around the village of Elk Rapids. What does that indicate?
That shows the surveillance they did on the way out of town after the Birch Lake surveillance. As they headed out of town, they stopped by the Elk Rapids Police Department and then Gilroy's hardware store there.
Okay. Were you able to determine from listening to the surveillance why they were going by Gilroy's Got It?
They talked about supplies when they were up there
Okay, supplies for what?
for the kidnapping operation.
Okay. Go ahead, please, Adam.
I guess I'd ask for some clarification who they is, Your Honor.
Agent, what could you describe which vehicle or supplier you're referencing?
Sure. So this is CHS Dan's vehicle with CHS Dan, Adam Fox, and Eric Molitor in the car. I recall hearing discussion about the hardware store, but I don't recall who said what, which exact statement occurred. I just remember hearing discussion about the hardware store.
The route is now it looks to be traveling south again. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Adam, please. Pause. Okay. If I'm correct, the earlier portion of this exhibit indicated that Dan and Mr. Fox arrived at Mr. Molitor's home at 12:18. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I believe they departed at 12:36. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and now they're back at Mr. Molitor's at 5:40. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Did they go anywhere else, do anything else besides go to Elk Rapids and do what you've described so far?
No.
Okay. Go ahead, please. Adam. Okay, thank you. Can you look at 198 input, please?
I have it here.
Okay. What is it?
This is a photograph off the internet that I found. It's the Elk Rapids Chamber of Commerce photograph, and it is what I recognize as the Elk River Bridge on 31.
And remind us why that bridge over the Elk River is important in this case.
This is the bridge that Adam Fox scouted out to place explosives under during the nighttime surveillance. So this was part of the plan to deter first responders from the Elk Rapids Police Department.
Okay. There's obviously two bridges that you could use to get from the village of Elk Rapids up to Birch Lake. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the time, on the first time that you heard Adam Fox talking about that, did it appear that he was aware of the second bridge?
When he went down to scout out the bridge, he noticed the second bridge and stated that he'd be blowing that one too.
And that was during at what point in time?
That was during the nighttime surveillance, which is the first time we heard of it on September 12th that night.
Good, thank you. Was any picture captured of Mr. Fox doing that?
Yes,
Okay, and who took that picture?
that was Undercover Red, who went under the bridge. Undercover Red was the FBI's explosive expert who we introduced to Adam Fox.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, okay? All right, and did you receive that picture?
Yes, after the surveillance, I met with Undercover Red and collected his recording devices and any evidence he obtained.
Okay, and did you obviously debrief or speak with him about what happened?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. I'll move for admission of Exhibit 198, please.
I'd stand my objection. Mr. Berman.
Okay, the court will admit, people's proposed exhibit 198, it's obviously, as has been testified, I guess a generic photo of that bridge is how I would describe it. That has been made clear to the jury so they can give that way, whatever, they can give that whatever way they wish. But I do believe it would assist the fact finder when referencing this location, so we make it.
Thank you, Judge. You mentioned Mr. Fox going underneath the bridge on the nighttime surveillance, right?
Yes, sir.
On the north end of, or the north side of the river there, what do we see?
So the right side of this picture is north, and there's a boardwalk that goes under the bridge, so you can see the abutment of the bridge.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Can you look at exhibit rather, 202 in your book there? It's actually, it's not going to be. Are you familiar with exhibit 202?
Yes, I am.
And what is that?
This is a dash camera video that was provided by Brian Higgins. Brian Higgins was from Wisconsin. He came over to the Luther training. He was on the nighttime surveillance. He was the one who had affixed dash cam video to his truck that he recorded the surveillance for the operators.
And where did that video project, or what was it covering?
So there's a camera facing out in front of his truck and a camera facing towards him. So there was two cameras on that dash cam video.
Okay. And tell us how you came into possession of that.
After the nighttime surveillance on Sunday in Luther, so this was September 13th, 2020, there was a meeting, and following the meeting, we call it the Circle of Trust meeting, Brian Higgins gave CHS Dan a thumb drive with the recordings he'd captured so that the team could use it for further training. After that day, I met with Dan and obtained that evidence, and which is this dash cam video.
Okay. And generally, what does it show us?
So generally, it's about a 2-minute video, and it shows the front of Brian Higgins' car, which has Ty Garbin and Caleb Franks in it, as it's going down Timberlake Drive, and they're looking for the governor's address based on Adam Fox's description. So this is what we're calling the signal car. Later, this is the first trip down, and then on subsequent trips, they'll flash their lights going down Timberlake Drive.
Okay. And Timberlake Drive, is that the street that the governor's cabin was on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The video, I'm going to move for admission of Exhibit 202, please.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Cybert?
Stand on objection.
Mr. Barnett?
No objection.
What will it admit, because Exhibit 202, Regent will testify as to the video's creation from his knowledge, explaining how he retrieved it, and so it will be admitted and published.
Thank you very much. And can you play that, please? Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant. Yeah.
Here's some fire lane numbers, these green signs up here. What's numbers we're looking for? 8936. 566. Is that one more? These are 6 minutes. This thing only fire roll down. These are 731 or 6? Oh, yeah. 691 down. So it might wonder if it's 6831. It's got to be. Can't read those guys. Yeah, we're going down. How much longer do we have on this road? They said it's the end. They said it's close to the very end, so maybe these numbers will pop up on the other side. It's 35. 6515. This is the end over here. Should we miss that number? Yeah.
Thank you. You called this the spotter car, is that correct?
No,
Oh, yeah,
the
I'm
signal
sorry.
car.
Signal car. How many vehicles were part of the nighttime surveillance?
3 vehicles.
Okay, you've indicated the signal car. What were the other 2 cars?
The spotter car and the lookout car.
Okay, who was in the spotter car?
The spotter car was driven by CHS Dan. Barry Croft was in the car. Adam Fox was in the car. Obviously, CHS Dan. Steve Robeson was in the back seat. I believe there was one other person in the car. Oh, Undercover Red. Undercover Red was in the car.
Let's come back to Undercover Red for a minute. You mentioned that using undercover agents yesterday, your testimony, I think, was that it's an exceptional thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you mentioned there's obviously danger to them.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen on the jury why Undercover Red was introduced into this investigation?
So Undercover Red was an explosive expert, and he was introduced because Adam Fox was looking and had claimed to have found his own explosive expert, and we didn't know who that was. Adam Fox was in contact with somebody he called the Baker, and Adam Fox had described to CHS Dan what the Baker could do, what his capabilities were to be able to make cakes and send cupcakes We were concerned because based on Adam Fox's description, it sounded like the baker knew what he was doing. And so we didn't want actual explosives to be in Adam Fox's hands. So I determined that we needed to get an undercover agent into that role so that Adam Fox would only be buying explosives from us for safety of the public.
Would Adam Fox, would Red ever sell or provide real explosives to Adam Fox?
No, Red would never provide any actual explosives to Adam Fox.
Okay. All right, and then, so we're going back to the nighttime surveillance. We got a spotter car, a signal car, a spotter car, and then I think the third car again was?
That was a lookout car.
Okay, and what was the role of the lookout car?
The lookout car was in the neighborhood looking for anything that could be a problem for surveillance. So law enforcement, activity in the community. They're performing surveillance at night. They'd already obtained surveillance during the day. So you need to know the activity of the neighborhood, the pattern of life at night, as well as be looking for law enforcement, because it's a lot different when you're doing surveillance at night than it is during the day.
Okay, who was in the surveillance car?
That was Mike. Oh, I'm sorry, the lookout car.
The lookout car. Thank you. I
Okay.
conflated that.
That was Mike Null, Bill Null, and undercover Mark.
Okay, and did you? Tell us what exhibit number 5 is, please.
Exhibit number 5 is an animated route of travel with some times on it, similar to the one we just saw with the daytime surveillance. It's the nighttime surveillance route of travel with the times.
And how did you put that together?
So I put that together through my knowledge from actually following behind, performing surveillance myself, and then listening to the audio live as it occurred, and then corresponding where the vehicles were during the live audio.
Okay. So the travel animation, does it show the route, does it accurately show what happened that evening in terms of the surveillance and the route?
Yes, sir.
Move for admission, please, of exhibit number 5.
Just a little bit of clarification, this is 1 vehicle, 3 vehicles, I'm not sure. If we could just get a better foundation on the.
Thank you.
On the
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. If you wonder how many vehicles were traveling for this one, as was explained in the previous one.
And I'd ask,
Yeah, so it shows 3 vehicles. It shows 1 route of travel, and then it'll pop up with a spot, and it'll show the location and timestamp of those 3 vehicles, and then the route of travel will progress up north, and it'll show the 3 vehicles, and then it'll keep going.
Mr. Chapman?
We'd stand on our objections, Judge.
Mr. Brennan?
No objection.
Okay. Well, the court will admit People's 5, it has been testified that it's an accurate description and representation of the route of travel for the night surveillance as testified to by Agent based on who's there. So it will be admitted and can be published.
thank you. And go ahead and play it, if you would. Pause that for a minute. we see here, Agent Impla?
So this is the location of Ty Garbin's remote hunting property. It doesn't have a physical address, but it's right there off of just west of 3 Mile Road and north of Skookum Road, and this is in Luther. So this was the field training exercise that weekend that Ty Garbin and the Wolverine Watchman and Adam Fox had put on.
Okay. And again, Barry Croft attended that training, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Molitor?
Yes, sir.
How about Mr. Michael Knoll?
Yes.
How about Mr. William Knoll?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please. Pause. We see here the Walmart near Cadillac, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What happens there generally?
This is the staging location where they all met and waited for people to arrive. As people left Luther training area, some people grabbed some food, some people changed their clothes. So they all generally left and then staged and waited for everybody to arrive in the Walmart parking lot in Cadillac.
Okay. All right, go ahead, please, Adam. And pause. What are we looking at there, Agent Epler?
Well, this is the Easy Mart. It's the mobile just off 31, but to the west of it is the AmVet Post 149. It's the parking lot of the AmVet where the 3 vehicles met and got instructions prior to heading north into the village and to the Birch Lake.
What type of instructions and by whom?
So Adam Fox gave instructions. He got out of his vehicle and he gave rolls to the vehicle. I think he was walking 2 different vehicles. It was raining out at night, so some people tried to stay in vehicles and minimize their time outside.
Okay. Go ahead, please, Adam. And pause. What are we looking at there? We saw the time stamp there. I think it was 11:02, if I'm not mistaken. What are we looking at there, Mr. Impla?
So this is the location of the spotter car. So Adam Fox's car with Undercover Red and Dan and Barry Croft. So this is where they pulled off on the west side of 31 and then went down through that boardwalk. And they took a picture. Adam Fox and Undercover Red went under the bridge and took pictures of the bridge abutment.
Okay. Let me pause for a moment here and ask. You mentioned the spotter car was going to flash its lights when it found the governor's address, I believe.
That's the signal car that flashes its
signal
lights.
car. I apologize. The signal car was going to flash its lights as it went by the governor's address. Is that?
Yeah, so the signal car was going to flash its lights. They also had an IR illuminator, which is infrared light. They had a flashlight that they were going to shine. And the spotter car, which was on the north side of Birch Lake on the boat launch, had night vision, and they were trying to look across the lake and see if they could see the signals from the headlights and the IR illuminator so they could determine the route across the lake towards the governor's location.
Okay. Go ahead, please. Thank you. Pause. The picture we see there, what are we looking at?
So this is Adam Fox under the bridge abutment here on 31. So we're on the west side facing east across on Elk River. And that's Adam Fox going up under the bridge to take pictures of where to place explosives.
Okay. Please play. Pause. As we look at the screen now, where's the Governor's Street?
So the Governor's Street is just north of this purple location marker that says 1129. So that's Timberlake Drive right there as the purple marker is driving down Williams Road.
Okay, and we look to the north end of the lake there, and what is that?
That's the boat launch, so that's the location where the spotter car went.
Okay. Prior to this nighttime surveillance, Agent Impla, did you make any contact with your partners at the Michigan State Police and the Governor's security detail?
Yes, so prior to both surveillances, I contacted the commander of the Governor's Protection Detail, Trooper Scott McManus, before the daytime and the nighttime surveillance, and advised him and the protection detail of what was going on.
Okay. Was anybody at the Governor's address? I mean, did they allow anybody to be at the
Oh,
Governor's?
absolutely not.
Okay. Okay. On either surveillance?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
yeah, definitely, nobody was there.
Okay. Go ahead, please, Adam, and play that if you would.
So maybe these numbers will pop up on the side. 625, 6515. Should I read this that number? Yeah.
And Agent Impla, on the first pass down Timberlake Drive that evening, did the signal car, were they successful in finding the Governor's address?
So they went by the Governor's address. They initially had the address wrong. So initially when they went by, they didn't realize they got it. They were looking for the
Pause.
7800 block. Then later in the surveillance, they figured out that it was actually the 6800 block, and they had found the correct address.
Okay, so they're on the right street, first time, wrong address, correct?
Correct.
Second trip down, how many trips did they make that evening?
They went down and back, down and back.
Okay. And did the spotter car ever go on to Timberlake Drive?
No.
Okay. How about the lookout car that was occupied by the Null twins?
No. Both those cars stayed away from Timberlake Drive. That wasn't their role.
Okay. Go ahead, please, Adam. Pause. What are we about to see here, Agent Impla?
So this is the second run down Timberlake Drive, and what you'll see is the flashing of the high beams and the signaling with the infrared flashlight as they get by the Governor's house.
And if you could just, before you play that, Adam, we had video of the first trip down Timberlake Drive. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and remind us again how we came into possession with that?
Brian Higgins, the gentleman from Wisconsin, had provided that video to CHS Dan for use in training.
Okay, and Mr. Higgins is on the subjects of investigation charge exhibit number 1 there, right?
Yes,
And we
so
don't-
he's the third one over from the top, next to Adam Fox
Okay.
and Mike Knoll.
Okay, did you or Dan or anyone else in the investigation have any control of what Mr. Higgins provided?
No,
Okay, did Mr. Higgins provide the video to Dan, any video to Dan that captured the second trip down Timberlake Drive?
he just provided select clips of video for the team that he controlled, so he didn't have any control as to what he gave to us.
Okay, all right, so go ahead, please, Adam, and play. Why is the icon blinking?
So this is when they're flashing their high beams and using the IR illuminator to try and signal over to the spotter team on the boat launch, which had the night vision.
And your do you have any coverage of the spotter team on the north end of the lake at the boat launch?
Yes, CHS Dan and Undercover Red were there, so I was able to monitor that live.
Okay, and was the signaling from the signal car successful to the spotter car?
Objection, hearsay.
He was listening to what he said.
That's the difference. Just for the purposes of the record, I'll sustain the objection. I believe Mr. Wilson's going to be first.
Thank you, Judge. You were live monitoring again, means you can hear. Tell us what that is exactly.
Yeah, so Undercover Red is wearing a transmitter, and as is CHS Dan. And so I'm live monitoring the traffic on those devices during the surveillance.
While you were monitoring that, were you able to hear Mr. Fox make any comments about seeing any of the lights flashing from the signal car?
Yes, I was able to hear Mr. Fox say that he saw the signal car through the night vision that he was looking through.
Okay. Go ahead, please, Adam. Continue to play. And I'm sorry, Adam, can you go back a little bit? I got headed to the pickleball courts. And pause, please. Okay, what are we seeing there, Agent Edward?
So this is the debrief location. So following the surveillance, about 15 minutes that they were going up and down the street and doing the signal spotting, they met here at, I don't know if it's tennis courts or pickleball courts, but it's right across from the Oasis Red Bull Tavern. And they spoke briefly, talked about what was going on before they got out of town.
Okay. Is that the same spot? Did you mention the Red Bull Tavern, the Oasis Red Bull Tavern yesterday during the daytime surveillance?
I did, yes.
Okay. During the day, during the daytime surveillance, I'm sorry, you mentioned the lunch.
Yes.
Okay. And is the Red Bull where they had lunch?
Yeah, so Red Bull Tavern is where Eric Molitor, CHS Dan, and Adam Fox had lunch during the daytime surveillance.
Okay, and this is the same location?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Go ahead, please, Adam.
I'm sorry, it's just across the street from it. It's not at it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Where did the cars go to after the surveillance?
Two of the cars went back to Luther, and undercover Mark took off.
Okay. All right, thank you. Can you look in your book, please, and tell us what exhibit number 6 is?
Yep, that's a good time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our morning breaks. So if you could, because maybe say draft, use this time to make your selection for lunch and vote. Where you're coming back. So you guys do this to us, okay? We'll take a break for a good 10, 15 minutes to give everybody a chance to use the restroom, use our coffee, or use and then we'll be back. All rise for the break. You all can see. Okay, the record can reflect the jury is out of the courtroom. I have one question about exhibit 202 in the book that I was given. There was a 202T of the transcript. Is that going to be admitted also as a separate exhibit, or is it not being admitted?
Let me catch up with you, Judge. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Would you like it here?
Yeah, I got it, thank you. Give me a moment during the break, Judge, we'll think about how to cope with that. I think the audio was fairly clear, I may move for it. I think, you know what, and when the jury comes back, I will move for that transcript to be admitted. I'll foundation it with this witness.
Okay.
And thank you for the reminder.
Okay, I just wanted to know if they were being,
Yeah,
the parties don't have to understand.
yep, no, I understand, thank you.
So for clarification, are we gonna go over that again then?
I'll
Just
leave,
asking.
yeah, when we come back from a break, I will lay the foundation, we'll get that in.
Okay, and obviously, any objections would be very bad. Other than that, Mr. Wilson, anything for you before we take a break?
No, sir.
Mr. and Ms. Dunfield?